I stood in the doorway of that dining room, my hands trembling against the frame, watching my 3 children, my own flesh and blood, argue over money that didn't even belong to them yet. Marcus had his finger jabbed toward Angela, my sweet Angela who'd taken me in when I had nowhere else to go. Denise sat back with her arms crossed, that look on her face like she'd swallowed something bitter. And Terence, Lord, Terence was pacing like a caged animal, his voice getting louder with every word. She's oh you are, mother, Marcus spat, his expensive cologne, thick enough to choke on. Whatever she's got belongs to us, not some strangers who picked her up off the side of the road. The side of the road, that's where they'd left me 4 months ago, like trash, like I was nothing. Angela stood up then, all 5'3" of her, with her natural hair pulled back and her teacher voice coming out strong. You left her when she needed you most. This family isn't for sale. I felt something shift in my chest, not pain, I'd had enough of that. Something else, something like freedom, because sitting in my purse, folded neat as Sunday church clothes, was a letter from a lawyer in Montgomery, a letter about land, about properties my Uncle Silas had left, me the uncle who'd moved to Alabama during the Great Migration and made something of himself in real estate. Properties I'd never even known about until Angela helped me sort through the box of papers. My children had been too busy to look at 20-3 acres, 4 rental properties, a small commercial building on a corner lot that had just been rezoned. My children had thrown me away when they thought I was worthless. Now they were back, circling like vultures, because they'd heard whispers. Someone had talked, maybe that nosy lawyer's secretary, maybe one of their friends who worked at the county clerk's office. It didn't matter how they found out. What mattered was this. I was 74 years old, and for the first time in my life, I held all the cards. Marcus took a step toward Angela, and Darius moved between them without a word, his mechanic's hands hanging loose at his sides, his face calm but immovable. My Darius, who reminded me so much of my late husband Robert, same quiet strength, same way of protecting without threatening. Ma, Denise said, her voice syrupy sweet now, so different from the bite it had when she'd told me I was too much work to keep around. We made mistakes. We know that, but blood is blood, right? We're family. We should handle family business together. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When had the light gone out of her eyes? When had she become this person who could abandon her own mother and then waltz back in pretending nothing had happened? You're right, Denise, I said quietly, stepping into the room. Every eye turned to me. Blood is blood. I walked to the table where Angela had made my favorite meal, her grandmother's recipe for smothered chicken, greens cooked with ham hocks, cornbread still warm from the oven, the table where I'd sat every night for 4 months, telling stories to Angela and Darius's babies, feeling useful again, feeling loved. But family, I continued, reaching into my purse. Family is who lifts you up when you've fallen. I pulled out the letter, placed it on the table, and watched my children's faces change as they realized I knew. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. Let's build this community together. 4 months earlier, I sat in the back seat of Marcus's SUV with my 2 suitcases beside me and my purse clutched in my lap. The leather seats were cold, even though it was a warm September afternoon in Atlanta. Or maybe it was just me. Maybe I'd been cold since Robert died 2 years ago, since the warmth went out of my life, and I was left with just these 3 children I'd raised, fed, clothed, and loved, with everything I had. Ma, you comfortable back there? Marcus asked, but his eyes in the rearview mirror didn't quite meet mine. I'm fine, baby, I said, because that's what mothers do. We say we're fine, even when we're breaking apart inside. We'd been driving for 20 minutes. Marcus had picked me up from the senior apartment I could barely afford anymore. The 1-bedroom with the broken air conditioning and the neighbors who played their music too loud. He'd said we were going to talk about options. That's what he'd called it on the phone. Options. Denise had been there when he loaded my things into the car. She'd stood on the sidewalk in her scrubs, just off her night shift at Grady Hospital, her face tight and tired. This is for the best, Mama, she'd said. You need more care than we can give you. More care. I was 74, not 94. I could cook my own meals, clean my own house, take my own medicine. What I needed wasn't carit, was company. It was family. It was someone to talk to besides the 4 walls of that little apartment. But I didn't say that. I just hugged her, and she barely hugged back. Terence hadn't even shown up. He's got some things to handle. Marcus had said, which meant Terence was either hungover or dodging another creditor, or both. Now, we were on some road I didn't recognize, heading away from the city, past the places where people lived and into the spaces between. Trees crowded the roadside, the sun hung low, painting everything gold and red, beautiful and cruel at the same time. Marcus, I said, my voice careful. Where exactly are we going? He cleared his throat. There's a place, a really good facility. State of the art, they've got activities, nursing care, everything you might need. My stomach dropped. A nursing home, not a nursing home. Assisted living, it's different. I don't need assisted living. I need ma. He cut me off. And his voice had an edge to it I'd never heard before. Not when he was a boy asking for lunch money. Not when he was a teenager coming home past curfew. Not even when he was a young man making his first big mistakes. We can't do this anymore. I've got my business. Denise has her shifts. Terence's ... Terence. We all agreed. You all agreed. Without me. About me. The car slowed. My heart sped up. We weren't pulling into a parking lot. There was no building with a nice sign and flower beds. There was just ... road, and trees, and the shoulder where Marcus was now stopping the car. What are you doing? I asked. He put the car in park, but kept the engine running. For a long moment, he just sat there, his hands on the steering wheel, his expensive watch catching the light. Then he turned around to look at me really, look at me, and I saw something in his face that made my blood go cold, shame, and determination to do it anyway. Ma, I'm sorry, he said, but his voice was flat. We can't afford to take care of you. The three of us talked, and we can't. Can't or won't. The words came out sharper than I intended. It doesn't matter. He reached back and opened my door. You're a burden to us, Mama. We can't take care of you anymore. A burden. That word hung in the air between us like smoke, stinging my eyes, filling my lungs until I couldn't breathe right. Marcus Anthony Johnson, I said, using his full name like I did when he was a boy. You don't mean that. I do. He wouldn't look at me anymore. There's a shelter about 3 miles that way. They'll help you figure something out. He got out of the car, walked around to the trunk, and pulled out my 2 suitcases, set them on the gravel shoulder like he was dropping off dry cleaning. Then he got back in the driver's seat. Marcus, I'm sorry, Ma, and he drove away. I stood there on the side of that road, watching the SUV disappear around a bend, the red taillights blinking like evil eyes before they vanished completely. My suitcases sat in the dirt and gravel. My purse hung from my shoulder. And I stood there in my Sunday dress, the yellow one with the little flowers that Robert had always loved, trying to understand what had just happened. My son had left me on the side of the road. My son, who I'd carried for 9 months. Who I'd walked the floor with when he had colic, who I'd worked double shifts to buy school clothes for, who I'd cheered for at every basketball game, who I'd prayed over every single night of his life until he moved out. That son had just called me a burden and left me on the side of a highway like I was garbage. The sun was getting lower. Cars passed, their drivers not even glancing my way. Why would they? An old black woman with suitcases on the side of the road, probably just waiting for someone to pick her up. They'd think, not their problem. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come, just tears. They ran hot down my cheeks, dripping off my chin, onto the yellow flowers of my dress. I thought about Robert, about how he'd died thinking our children were good people who'd take care of me. I thought about all the years I'd spent putting them first, their needs, their wants, their dreams, while I worked myself to the bone and never complained. Because that's what mothers do, and this was how they repaid me. A car slowed, an old sedan, the kind that had seen better days, but then it sped back up and kept going. Another one passed without even tapping its brakes. The sun touched the horizon. I picked up my suitcases, one in each hand, and started walking. I made it maybe a quarter mile before I had to stop. My hands were cramping around the handles of the suitcases, and my hip, the left one that always acted up when the weather changed, was starting to throb with every step. I set the cases down and leaned against a tree, trying to catch my breath. The road stretched out in both directions, empty as my heart felt. I thought about calling someone, but who? My sister Clara lived all the way in Chicago, and she was having her own health problems. The ladies from church, my church home for 37 years, most of them were my age or older, struggling with their own families, their own troubles. I couldn't burden them. There was that word again. Burden. Is that what I'd become? A burden too heavy for my own children to carry. I opened my purse and pulled out my wallet. $43. My social security check wasn't due for another week, and most of it would go to the rent I apparently wouldn't be paying anymore since I'd just been evicted from my apartment by my own son. I had a debit card with maybe $60 on it. That was it. That was everything. In the front pocket of my purse, I kept a small photo album, just a handful of pictures I couldn't bear to leave behind in the apartment. I pulled it out now, thumbing through it with shaking hands. There was Robert on our wedding day, 1972, both of us young and beautiful and full of hope. There were my babies, Marcus, as a toddler, with his gap-toothed smile, Denise in her first communion dress, Terrence at his high school graduation, the only one of my children to finish. There were birthday parties and Christmases and Easters, all the moments I'd scraped together money to make special for them. When had it all gone wrong? Marcus had changed when he got that real estate job, when he started making real money and hanging around people who measured worth in dollar signs. He'd started looking at me different, like I was something from his past he needed to leave behind to become the person he wanted to be. Denise, my Denise, had always been sensitive, easily wounded. She'd convinced herself over the years that I loved the boys more, which wasn't true. But how do you argue with someone's feelings? She'd built up walls around her heart, brick by brick, until I couldn't reach her anymore. And when Robert died, instead of coming together, we drifted further apart. Terrence was my baby, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd protected him too much, made excuses for him too many times. He'd never learned to stand on his own. Never learned that life requires work and sacrifice. He'd learned to take He'd learned that real well. A truck rumbled past. So close I felt the wind of it, and I jerked back against the tree. The driver laid on his horn like I was the problem, like I was trying to throw myself in front of him, instead of just trying to survive. The sky was turning purple now. That deep evening color that used to mean dinner was ready and family was gathering around the table. Robert would come in from his shift at the factory, wash his hands at the kitchen sink, and lift me off my feet with a kiss that still made me blush after 20 years of marriage. The kids would fight over who got to say grace, and we'd hold hands around that little table in our little house and thank God for our blessings. When had we stopped being grateful? When had having enough stopped being enough? I closed the photo album and put it back in my purse. My stomach was growling. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and that had just been toast and coffee. The shelter Marcus mentioned was 3 miles away. He'd said, 3 miles, in these shoes, with these suitcases, with this hip, that might as well have been 300. But what choice did I have? I picked up the suitcases again and kept walking. The road had no sidewalk, just a narrow shoulder that disappeared in places where the trees grew close. Every time a car came by, I had to step further into the grass, praying I wouldn't trip on a root or a hole I couldn't see in the fading light. My arms felt like they were being pulled out of their sockets. My hip was screaming now, each step a little knife of pain. I thought about sitting down, just sitting right there on the side of the road and waiting for what? For someone to care, for my children to realize what they'd done and come back for me. They weren't coming back. That truth settled over me like a cold blanket. They'd made their choice. They'd weighed me on their scales and found me wanting, found me too expensive, too inconvenient, too much of a burden to carry. 50-3 years I'd been a mother, 53 years of putting their needs before my own, of working jobs that broke my back so they could have what they needed, of praying and hoping and sacrificing. And this was my reward, abandoned, on a highway like an unwanted dog. The anger came then, hot and sharp. I welcomed it because it was better than the grief. It gave me strength to keep putting one foot in front of the other. How dare they? How dare Marcus look me in the eye and call me a burden when I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his college, when I'd co-signed his first car loan because no one else would, when I'd watched his kids every weekend so he could build his precious business. How dare Denise act like I was some weight around her neck when I'd sat with her through 2 divorces, when I'd helped her study for her nursing exams, when I'd been the one to tell her she was strong enough to make it on her own. And Terrence, God help me, but Terrence had been taking from me his whole life, and now he couldn't even be bothered to show up and look me in the eye while they threw me away. A car was approaching from behind me, its headlights starting to flick on in the gathering dark. I moved as far to the side as I could, my suitcase wheels catching on the uneven ground, but this time, the car slowed, then stopped. I turned around, my heart pounding. You hear stories, old women on lonely roads, bad things happening. I clutched my purse tighter, ready to scream if I had to, ready to fight if it came to that. A car door opened. A woman's voice called out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" The woman who stepped out of that car was young, late 20s maybe, with beautiful dark skin and natural hair pulled back in a head wrap. She wore jeans and a colorful blouse, and her face held genuine concern, not the kind of fake worry people put on before they drive away. Behind her, a man emerged from the driver's side, tall, dark-skinned, with a neat beard and kind eyes. He held up his hands, showing me he meant no harm. "Ma'am," the woman said again, "are you all right? Do you need help?" I opened my mouth to say I was fine, that automatic response, drilled into me over 7 decades, but what came out instead was the truth. "No, I'm not all right." She moved closer, and I could see now that she was even younger than I'd thought, but her eyes were old in a way that told me she'd known some hardship herself. She looked at my suitcases, at my Sunday dress covered in road dust, at my face where the tears had dried in salty tracks. "I'm Angela," she said gently. "This is my husband, Darius. Can we give you a ride somewhere?" "I don't know where to go," I admitted, and saying it out loud made my throat close up again. "My son, he left me here. Said there was a shelter 3 miles ahead." The look that passed between Angela and Darius told me everything I needed to know about what kind of people they were. Anger flashed across Darius's face, not at me, but for me. Angela's mouth pressed into a thin line. "No one leaves their grandma like this," Angela said, and the way she said grandma with such respect, such warmth, made something crack open in my chest. She turned to Darius. "Baby, we're taking her home." "Already planned on it," Darius said. He walked over and picked up both my suitcases like they weighed nothing. "Ma'am, you're family now." I tried to protest. "You don't even know me. I can't impose." "You're not imposing," Angela said firmly. She took my arm, gentle but sure. "Someone needs to look after you, and clearly your son isn't going to. So we will. That's all there is to it." I let her guide me to their car, a modest sedan that had seen better days but was clean inside. Darius loaded my suitcases into the trunk while Angela helped me into the back seat. There was a car seat next to me, the kind for a toddler, with juice stains and cracker crumbs. Evidence of life, of family, of love. As we pulled back onto the road, I realized I was crying again, but these tears felt different. Not grief or anger, something more like gratitude mixed with disbelief. These strangers, these beautiful young people, had stopped when my own children wouldn't. "What's your name, Mum?" Angela asked from the front seat. "Evelyn. Evelyn Johnson." "Miss Evelyn," Darius said, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "We're glad we found you. Sometimes God puts people in our path for a reason." I hadn't thought about God much since Marcus drove away. Hadn't been able to square the God I'd prayed to my whole life with the God who would let this happen to me. But sitting in that car with these 2 young people who'd stopped to help when they didn't have to, when it would have been easier to drive past like everyone else, maybe God wasn't done with me yet. "Do you have family in Atlanta?" Angela asked. "Someone we should call?" "I have 3 children," I said, then corrected myself. I thought I did, but no, there's no one to call. The truth of that statement sat heavy on my tongue. I'd raised 3 people from birth, given them everything I had, and now I had no one to call. My sister was too far away and too sick. My church friends were struggling themselves. Robert was gone. I was truly alone. Except I wasn't. Not right now. We drove through Atlanta as the last light faded from the sky. Angela and Darius lived in West End. They told me a neighborhood that was old Atlanta, where Black families had put down roots and built community. Their house was small, a little bungalow with a front porch and flower boxes in the windows. "It's not much," Angela said as we pulled into the driveway, "but it's home. It looked like heaven to me." Inside, the house smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. There were toys scattered across the living room floor, evidence of children, of family, of the kind of chaos that comes from love. Photos covered the walls, Angela and Darius on their wedding day. A beautiful baby girl, a toddler boy with his father's smile. "Let me show you to the guest room," Angela said. She led me down a short hallway to a small bedroom with a double bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a backyard where I could see a swing set in the moonlight. Darius brought in my suitcases and set them gently on the floor. "The bathroom's right across the hall," he said. "We've got an extra toothbrush and whatever else you might need. You just make yourself comfortable, Miss Evelyn." When they left me alone, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The room was simple but clean, decorated with care. There were fresh towels on the dresser and a vase of flowers on the nightstand. Someone had thought about making this space welcoming. I heard voices in the kitchen, Angela and Darius talking in low tones. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. They were talking about me. About what to do with this old woman they'd picked up off the side of the road. I should have felt ashamed. I should have felt like a burden. But I didn't. I felt ... held. A soft knock came at the door, and Angela peeked in. "Miss Evelyn, I'm making some dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and salad. You hungry?" My stomach answered before I could, growling loud enough for both of us to hear. Angela laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "I'll take that as a yes. Come on out when you're ready." I washed my hands and face in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror for the first time since Marcus had driven away. I looked old, tired, the kind of tired that sleep won't fix. My eyes were red from crying, my hair was coming loose from its pins, and my dress was dusty and wrinkled. But I was here, I was alive, and I was not alone in the kitchen. Angela was stirring a pot of sauce while Darius set the table. They moved around each other with the easy grace of a couple who'd learned to be a team. When they saw me, they both smiled. "Have a seat," Miss Evelyn, Darius said, pulling out a chair. We ate together at their small kitchen table, and they asked me questions, real questions, not the polite surface kind. They wanted to know about my life, my marriage to Robert, my work as a seamstress and a cook. They listened when I talked about the old days, when times were hard but family was strong. I didn't tell them everything, not yet. Not about how Marcus had looked at me like I was nothing, or how Denise had stood there in her scrubs with empty eyes, or how Terence hadn't even cared enough to show up. That pain was still too fresh, too raw, but I told them enough. The first morning in Angela and Darius's home, I woke up confused. For a moment, I thought I was in my old apartment, then in the house I'd shared with Robert, then nowhere I recognized. The panic rose in my chest until I heard children's voices, bright, happy, questioning. "Daddy, who is the lady?" "That's Miss Evelyn's son. Remember we talked about this? She's going to stay with us for a while." I got dressed slowly, my hips stiffed from yesterday's walking, and made my way to the kitchen. The smell of coffee was strong and good. When I appeared in the doorway, a little girl of about 3 looked up at me with wide eyes, and a boy who couldn't have been more than 5 hid behind his father's legs. "Good morning, Miss Evelyn," Angela said brightly. She was already dressed for work in slacks and a neat blouse, her hair wrapped in a different, more professional head wrap. "This shy one here is Caleb, and that's Maya. Kids, say good morning." "Good morning," they chorused, though Caleb still wouldn't look at me directly. "I made coffee," Darius said. "Angela's got to get to school. She teaches 3rd grade and I need to get to the shop. Will you be okay here with the kids? My mama usually watches them, but she's recovering from surgery. If it's too much, it's not too much," I said quickly. Maybe too quickly, because they both looked at me with concern. "I mean, I'd like to, if you trust me with them." Angela came over and took both my hands in hers. "Miss Evelyn, you're not our babysitter, you're our guest. But if you want to help out while you're getting your feet under you, we'd be grateful." After they left, I stood in that kitchen with 2 little ones staring up at me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Useful, needed, like I had purpose again. "Are you hungry?" I asked them. Maya nodded enthusiastically. Caleb nodded too, but more cautiously. "Well then," I said, rolling up my sleeves, "let's see what we can make." They had the basics in their pantry: eggs, flour, milk, sugar. I made pancakes from scratch, the way my own mama had taught me 70 years ago. While Maya stood on a stool and helped me stir, and Caleb slowly crept closer, drawn by curiosity and the smell of butter melting on the griddle. By the time Angela came home that afternoon, the house was clean, the laundry was folded, and both children were down for their naps. I'd found a rhythm I'd forgotten I had. "Miss Evelyn," Angela said, looking around in amazement, "you didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," I told her, and it was true. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to wake up in the morning. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to matter. The days turned into weeks. I fell into a routine with Angela, Darius, and the children. I'd wake up early, old habits die hardened, start coffee. Sometimes Darius would join me before the sun rose, and we'd sit in comfortable silence. 2 people who understood what it meant to work hard for the ones you love. I'd make breakfast for the family, nothing fancy, but made with care, grits and eggs. Biscuits from scratch. Sometimes my special French toast that Robert used to say was good enough to make angels weep. Angela would eat quickly, always rushing to get to her students, but she'd hug me before she left. "You're a blessing, Miss Evelyn," she'd say, and I'd feel it that I was blessing someone instead of burdening them. Darius worked long hours at his mechanic shop, but he always came home for dinner. No matter how tired he was, he'd sit at that table and bow his head while I said grace, and he'd tell us about his day. He reminded me so much of Robert. It sometimes hurt to look at him, that same steady strength, that same quiet dignity, that same way of loving his family through action rather than words. The children warmed to me quickly. Maya would climb into my lap while I snapped green beans or peeled potatoes, chattering about her day at preschool. Caleb, more reserved, would bring me his books to read, curling up beside me on the couch with his small body pressed against my side. One evening, about 3 weeks after they'd found me, Caleb looked up at me with his serious eyes and asked, "Miss Evelyn, can I call you Grandma?" My throat closed up. I couldn't speak for a moment, just nodded, while tears streamed down my face. He threw his little arms around my neck, and I held him tight. This child who wasn't mine by blood, but was becoming mine by love. Maya started calling me Grandma too, and soon it was just natural. I was Grandma Evelyn, and they were my grandbabies. And in the quiet moments when I'd watch them play, I'd thank God for putting me on that roadside where Angela and Darius would find me. But there were hard moments too, times when I'd catch sight of my phone, which I'd turned off after the first week because neither Marcus nor Denise nor Terence had tried to call anyway on. I'd think about my real grandchildren, the ones Marcus and Denise had, the ones I'd barely been allowed to see in the last few years. Did they miss me? Did they even know I was gone? "You thinking about your kids?" Angela asked me one night. We were sitting on the porch after dinner, watching fireflies dance in the yard, while Darius gave the children their baths inside. "How'd you know? You get this look," she said gently, "like you're somewhere else, somewhere sad." I was quiet for a moment, then said, "You ever love someone who doesn't love you back? Not romantic love, I mean family love, the kind that's supposed to be unconditional." Angela was quiet too. Then she said, "My father left when I was 6. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mama raised me and my 2 brothers by herself, working 3 jobs. When she got sick last year, cancer, my brothers suddenly had excuses. Too busy, too far away, too broke. It was just me and Darius, taking care of her until she passed." "I'm sorry," I said. "What I learned," Angela continued, "is that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, the people who aren't related to you will show up when your own blood won't." Darius, he had a rough childhood too. Foster care, group homes. He made his own family when he grew up, people who chose him and who he chose back. "That's why you stopped for me," I said, understanding, "because you know what it feels like to be left behind." "No one deserves that," she said fiercely, "especially not someone who gave everything to raise their children. You deserved better than what they gave you, Miss Evelyn." I reached over and took her hand. This young woman who'd saved me, who'd given me a home when my own children wouldn't, who treated me with the love and respect I'd earned over 7 decades of living and surviving and pushing through. "Thank you," I said, "for seeing me, for stopping." "Always," she said, "your family now." And sitting there on that porch, listening to my grandbabies laughing inside while they played with their daddy, I realized something important. I'd lost the family I'd made, but I'd found the family I needed. 2 months after Angela and Darius found me, on a Saturday morning when Darius had taken the kids to the park and Angela was tackling the mountain of paperwork that came with teaching, she asked me a question that would change everything. "Miss Evelyn, do you have any important documents we should keep safe? Social Security card, birth certificate, anything like that?" I thought about the papers still stuffed in my suitcases, the ones I'd thrown together in a panic when Marcus had told me to pack. "I have some things," I admitted, "but it's all a mess." I just grabbed what I could. "Let me help you sort through it," Angela offered. "I'm good at organizing, comes with the teacher territory. Plus, we should make sure you have everything in order, especially if we need to help you apply for assistance or anything like that." We spread everything out on the dining room table. My birth certificate, yellowed with age. Robert's death certificate that one still hurt to look at. My marriage license, the kids' birth certificates I'd kept them all these years, though they'd never asked for them back. Social Security cards, my Medicare card, old tax returns, receipts from paid bills, bank statements showing next to nothing. The detritus of a life, all fitting into one shoebox. Angela sorted through it all patiently, making neat piles and labeling folders she'd pulled from her teacher supplies. "You're very organized for someone who packed in a hurry," she commented. "Habit," I said. "Robert always said I was too careful with papers, but my mama lived through the Depression, and she taught me to keep records of everything." At the bottom of the pile was an envelope I'd forgotten about. It was thick, official looking, with a return address from Montgomery, Alabama. The postmark was from 6 months ago. "What's this?" Angela asked, holding it up. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I never opened it. It came right around when Robert died, and I just, I couldn't deal with anything else at the time." Angela looked at me, then at the envelope. "Want me to open it?" I nodded. She slid her finger under the flap and pulled out several pages of heavy paper. Her eyes scanned the first page, then widened. She read silently for a moment, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Miss Evelyn," she said carefully, "did you have an uncle named Silas Johnson?" The name hit me like a wave of memory. Uncle Silas. Yes, my daddy's older brother. He moved to Alabama back in the 50s, during the migration. Made something of himself in real estate. Or so the family stories went. We lost touch after my daddy died. Why? Angela set the papers down carefully, her hands trembling slightly. "Miss Evelyn, you need to read this." I picked up the letter. It was from a law firm, Marison Burke and Associates, attorneys at law, Montgomery, Alabama. The formal language was hard to parse at first, all the legal terminology swimming before my eyes. But certain phrases jumped out. "We regret to inform you of the passing of Silas Abraham Johnson. As his sole surviving heir. Estate, valued at approximately." I had to read that last part 3 times before it made sense. Then I read it a 4th time because surely I was seeing it wrong. "Angela," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "this can't be right. What does it say?" "It says Uncle Silas died 14 months ago, and he left everything to me. His sole surviving heir." My hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. "It says the estate includes 23 acres of land for rental properties and a commercial building in downtown Montgomery." Angela sat down heavily. Oh my God. We sat there in silence for a moment, both trying to process what this meant. The letter went on to explain that Uncle Silas had never married, had no children, and had specifically named me in his will. He'd tried to contact me several times in his final years, but I'd moved twice since Robert got sick, and the letters had never found me. There was a phone number for the lawyer, a Mr. Burke. A note that said they'd been trying to reach me for over a year, had sent multiple letters to my last known address, the house Robert and I had shared, the one I'd had to sell to pay his medical bills. "This is dated 6 months ago," Angela said, picking up the envelope. "This was their last attempt to find you." "I never saw the other letters," I said. "By the time this came, I was already in that apartment, and I was so deep in grief over Robert, I just, I put it aside." "Miss Evelyn," Angela said gently, "do you know what this means?" I did and I didn't. The words made sense individually, but together they formed a reality I couldn't quite grasp. My uncle I hadn't seen in 40 years, who I barely remembered except as a tall man with kind eyes who'd given me a silver dollar at my daddy's funeral, had left me property, land, buildings. "The letter says there's an estimated value," Angela continued, scanning the pages. "Miss Evelyn, it's substantial." She showed me the number. I had to sit down. It wasn't millions, nothing like that, but it was more money than I'd ever seen in my life, more than Robert and I had made in all our years of working combined, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days, enough to never worry about being a burden again. "This is why they've been paying property taxes on your behalf." Angela read further. "They've been managing the estate, keeping everything maintained, waiting to hear from you. The rental properties are occupied and generating income. The commercial building has a long-term tenant. It's all just been sitting there, waiting for you." I thought about Marcus driving away, about Denise standing on that sidewalk with her arms crossed, about Terrence not even showing up. They'd thrown me away because they thought I was worthless, thought I had nothing to offer but problems and expenses. And all along, I'd had this. "We need to call this lawyer," Angela said decisively. "Like, right now. We need to make sure this is legitimate and figure out what you need to do to claim everything." "It's Saturday," I pointed out weakly. "There's an email address here. I'm writing to them now." She was already pulling out her phone. "Miss Evelyn, this is your second chance. This is justice." But as she typed, as the reality started to sink in, I felt something complicated blooming in my chest. Not just relief or joy, though those were there, but something darker too. Something that tasted like vindication and hurt all mixed together. My children had abandoned me, thinking I was worthless. What would they think if they knew the truth? The answer came to me almost immediately. and it made my blood run cold. They'd come back, not because they loved me, or missed me, or realized they'd made a terrible mistake. They'd come back because now I had something they wanted. Angela, I said slowly, I don't want my children to know about this. Not yet. She looked up from her phone. Miss Evelyn, please, I said, I need time to think, to figure this out. If they find out about the inheritance, they'll come back, and it won't be because they care about me. It'll be because they care about the money. Angela studied my face for a long moment, then she nodded. Okay, we'll keep it quiet for now. But Miss Evelyn, eventually we have to deal with this. We have to contact the lawyer and get everything sorted legally. I know, I said. Just give me a few days to wrap my head around it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest room, my room now, really, and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Uncle Silas, trying to remember him more clearly. He'd been at my wedding, I thought, had given Robert and me a generous check that had helped us buy our first furniture. He'd sent Christmas cards for a few years, then they'd stopped coming, and I'd been too busy raising kids and working and surviving to track him down. Had he been lonely? Had he thought about family at the end? Is that why he'd left everything to me, his niece he barely knew, instead of to charity or the state? Or had he known somehow that I'd need it, that life would knock me down and I'd need a hand to pull me back up? I wished I could thank him, wished I could tell him that his gift, this unbelievable, impossible gift, had come at exactly the moment I needed it most. The next morning, I went to church for the first time since moving in with Angela and Darius. They belonged to a small Baptist church in the neighborhood, the kind where everybody knows everybody, and the choir sings like they're trying to wake the heavens. The pastor was a young woman that would have scandalized my mama. But times had changed, and her sermon was about the valley of dry bones, about how God can breathe life into what seems dead and gone. I sat in that pew with tears running down my face, Maya on one side holding my hand and Caleb on the other. And I felt something shift in my spirit. This wasn't just about money or property or inheritance. This was about worth, about value, about understanding that my worth wasn't determined by whether my children wanted me or not. God had seen me on that roadside, had sent Angela and Darius to find me, had preserved an inheritance I didn't even know existed until I needed it most. I was not a burden. I was not worthless. I was not disposable. I was Evelyn Johnson, beloved daughter of the Most High. And I had been given a gift for a reason. After church, we went home and had Sunday dinner, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the way I used to make for my own family. As we sat around the table, Darius leading us in grace, Angela squeezing my hand, the children bowing their heads, I realized something important. Whatever I decided to do with Uncle Silas's gift, it would honor the people who'd treated me with love when I had nothing to offer but myself. It would honor the family who'd chosen me when my blood family had thrown me away. And as for Marcus, Denise, and Terrence, they'd made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. 3 weeks after we discovered the letter, on a Thursday evening when I was helping Maya with a puzzle and Angela was grading papers, there was a knock at the door. Not a polite knock, a demanding one. The kind that says the person on the other side expects to be let in. Darius opened it, and I heard a voice that made my blood freeze. We're looking for Evelyn Johnson. We were told she's staying here. Marcus, I stood up slowly, my heart hammering. Maya looked at me with confusion. She could sense the change in the room. The way all the adults had gone still and tense. Who's asking? Darius said, and I could hear the protective edge in his voice. Her son. Now, is she here or not? Angela was already moving toward the door, placing herself next to her husband. They formed a united front, blocking the entrance, but I knew I couldn't hide forever. I walked to the door on shaking legs. Marcus stood on the porch in one of his expensive suits, looking irritated and impatient. Behind him, Denise leaned against the porch railing in her scrubs, and Terrence lounged on the steps, already looking bored with the whole situation. Mama, Marcus said when he saw me, his voice suddenly switching to something that might have been warmth if you didn't know it was fake. There you are. We've been so worried about you. The lie was so blatant, so obvious, that I almost laughed. Worried, I repeated flatly. That's why you left me on the side of a highway 3 months ago. Now, Mama, that's not fair. Not fair. My voice rose despite my intention to stay calm. You called me a burden and drove away. What part of that isn't fair to say? Denise pushed off the railing. We made a mistake, okay? We were stressed. We weren't thinking clearly. But we're here now. How did you even find me? I demanded. Marcus had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Someone from the neighborhood saw you at church. Word got around. Atlanta's a small world. Mama, that was a lie too. I could see it in his eyes. They'd been looking for me, which meant something had changed, something that made it worth their while to track me down. My stomach sank. They knew. Somehow, they knew about the inheritance. Why are you really here? I asked. The three of them exchanged glances. It was Terence who spoke up, surprising me. Look, Ma, we heard some things about Uncle Silas, about some property. There it was. Who told you? I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though I wanted to scream. Does it matter? Marcus said. The point is, we're family. We should handle family business together. We came to bring you home, help you sort everything out. You shouldn't be staying with strangers anyway. These strangers took me in when my own children left me to die, I said, and Darius put a gentle hand on my shoulder. Supporting me, they fed me, gave me a home, treated me like family. What did you do? We made a mistake, Denise said again, louder this time. How many times do we have to apologize? We're sorry, okay, we're sorry. But blood is blood, Mama. We're your children. You're right, I said quietly. Blood is blood, and you three share my blood. But these people, I gestured to Angela, Darius, and the children who had come to peek around the corner, curious about the raised voices. They're my family. Marcus's face hardened. The fake warmth disappeared. Fine, you want to play it that way. Let's talk legally. We're your next of kin. Whatever inheritance came from Uncle Silas, we have a right to know about it. We have a right to be involved in those decisions. Actually, Angela said, her teacher voice coming out crisp and clear, unless Miss Evelyn has been declared incompetent, which she hasn't, she has every right to manage her own affairs without your input. She's 74, not 4. Who the hell are you? Marcus snapped. I'm the woman who picked your mother up off the side of the road where you left her. Angela shot back. I'm the woman who made sure she had food and shelter and love, while you were too busy to care whether she lived or died. You don't know anything about our family situation, Denise said. I know enough, Angela replied. I know you abandoned her. I know she cried herself to sleep for weeks. I know she still makes excuses for you, even though you don't deserve it. Mama, Marcus said, turning back to me, his voice taking on a pleading quality that I'd never heard before. Please, let's just sit down and talk about this like family. Come out to dinner with us. Just hear us out. I looked at my 3 children standing on that porch, Marcus in his suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, Denise in her scrubs, arms crossed defensively, that permanent look of resentment on her face, Terence in his sneakers and designer hoodie, probably bought with borrowed money. When had they become strangers to me, or had they always been strangers, and I'd just refused to see it? You want to talk, I said. Fine, come inside. Angela and Darius exchanged worried glances, but they stepped aside. My children filed into the house, looking around with barely concealed judgment at the modest furnishings. The toys scattered on the floor, the life that Angela and Darius had built through hard work and love. We sat around the dining room table, the same table where we'd discovered the letter about the inheritance, where I'd eaten countless meals with my new family, where I'd helped Caleb with his letters and Maya with her counting. Now it became a battleground. So, Marcus said, settling into his chair like he owned it, let's talk about Uncle Silas's estate. What exactly do you know about it? I asked. We know there's property, Denise said. Land, buildings, rental income. A lawyer friend of Terence's heard something from someone at the county clerk's office in Montgomery. Said there was an estate in your name worth a significant amount. Terence had the decency to look slightly ashamed. I was asking around, trying to find you, wanted to make sure you were okay. The information just came up. Another lie. He'd been digging for money, hoping I had something worth taking. Here's what I know, I said, folding my hands on the table. Uncle Silas left me some things. I'm in the process of sorting out the legal details. That's all you need to know. That's not fair, Mama, Marcus said. We're your children. We have a right. You have no rights to anything I own. I interrupted. You gave up those rights when you left me on the side of that highway. We said we're sorry. Denise practically shouted. What more do you want from us? I want you to mean it, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. I want you to have come looking for me because you missed me, because you were worried, because you loved me, not because you heard I might have money. The silence that followed was damning. None of them could look me in the eye. We do love you, Marcus finally said. but it sounded hollow. But we also have to be practical. If there's family money involved, we should discuss it as a family. Maybe the inheritance could help all of us, help you get proper care, help us with our expenses. We could work together. Work together, I repeated, the way we worked together when you dumped me on the side of the road. Mama, please, Denise said, and there were actual tears in her eyes now, but I couldn't tell if they were real or if she'd finally learned to cry on command. We know we messed up, but we're here now. Doesn't that count for something? Did it? Should it? I looked at Angela and Darius, standing in the doorway to the kitchen, ready to support me, whatever I decided. I looked at Maya and Caleb, peeking around their parents' legs, my grandbabies who'd never asked me for anything but love. Then I looked back at my children, ones I'd carried and birthed and raised, and loved with everything I had, and saw only calculation in their eyes, only want, only greed, masquerading as concern. Stay for dinner, I heard myself say. Everyone looked surprised, my children most of all. Really, Marcus said, really, I'll cook. We'll eat together, like a family, and then we'll talk about what happens next. I moved around Angela's kitchen like it was my own because in many ways it had become mine. I pulled out chicken from the freezer that I'd been thawing for tomorrow's dinner, grabbed potatoes and green beans, and started working. Angela tried to help, but I shooed her away. This is my table to set, I told her quietly, my meal to make. She understood. This wasn't just about feeding my children, this was about showing them what they'd thrown away. Marcus, Denise, and Terence sat uncomfortably in the living room. They didn't know what to do with themselves in this small house, with these children staring at them, with the evidence of a life going on without them surrounding them on every side. Darius kept the kids occupied, but I could feel everyone's tension radiating through the house like heat. I'd made my smothered chicken, the recipe I'd perfected over 50 years. The one Robert used to say was better than his mama's, though he'd never admit it in front of her. I made my creamed potatoes with butter and sour cream. I made green beans with bacon and onions, cooked slow until they were tender. I made cornbread from scratch, the kind that's crispy on the outside and soft in the middle. I made the meal I used to make for Sunday dinners when my children were young, when they'd fight over the last piece of chicken, when they'd hug me and tell me I was the best cook in the world. When everything was ready, I called them all to the table. We sat down, Angela and Darius at the ends, Marcus, Denise, and Terence on one side, me on the other, with Maya and Caleb beside me. The children reached for my hands automatically when Darius started to say grace. My own children didn't reach for anyone's hands. They sat there stiffly while Darius thanked God for the food, for family, for blessings known and unknown. Amen, we chorused, except Marcus, Denise, and Terence were silent. They ate. They ate my cooking like they were starving, which told me they'd been missing it even if they'd never admit it. Marcus went 4 seconds. Denise complimented the chicken. Even Terence, who usually picked at his food, cleaned his plate. This is delicious, Miss Evelyn, Angela said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. She'd been bragging about my cooking to her co-workers, bringing leftovers to share with other teachers. Mama always could cook, Marcus said. And for just a moment, he sounded like my son again, like the little boy who'd come running into the kitchen, asking what was for dinner. But then he ruined it. Remember, Mama, remember how you used to make this every Sunday? We'd all sit together as a family. He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Those were the good old days. We could have that again. If I forgave them, if I shared the inheritance. I remember, I said quietly. I remember making this meal every Sunday for 20 years. Even when I was so tired I could barely stand after working double shifts. I remember how you'd eat and run, Marcus. Had somewhere better to be, always. Someone more important to see. His face darkened. That's not fair. Fair, I repeated. I looked at Denise. I remember making this for you when you came home from your first divorce. You stayed for 2 weeks, and I cooked every meal, listened to you cry every night. Then you met someone new and disappeared for 6 months without calling. Denise's jaw tightened. I was dealing with my own life, Mama, and you. I turned to Terence. I remember making this meal for your 30th birthday. You brought 8 friends, none of whom I'd met. They ate everything I'd made, drank all the beer in Robert's fridge, and left the house a mess. You borrowed $200 from me that night, never paid it back. I was going through a tough time, Terence muttered. You're always going through a tough time, I said, and I was always there, always cooking. Always helping, always giving, because that's what mothers do. That's what I thought love was. Mama, Marcus started. I'm not finished. My voice was steel. You three sat around this table, not this table, but our table. In our house, and you ate my food, and you took my love, and you took it for granted. And when I needed you, when Robert died and I was drowning in medical bills and grief and loneliness, where were you? Silence, Marcus. You were building your business. Too busy to visit more than once a month. Too busy to help me sort through Robert's things. Too busy to sit with me in the empty house where your father's absence was so loud I couldn't sleep. Denise, you were dealing with work stress, picked up extra shifts. You said, needed space. You said, but you had plenty of time to post on Facebook about your spa days and your girls' nights out. Terrence, you came around when you needed money. Otherwise, I didn't hear from you for weeks at a time. That's not. Denise tried to interrupt. It is true, I said firmly. All of it is true, and you know it. And then, when I couldn't afford my apartment anymore, when I needed help, you decided I was a burden. You decided it was too expensive, too inconvenient, too hard to deal with me. So you threw me away. Maya started to cry softly. She was sensitive, my grandbaby, and she could feel the pain in my voice, even if she didn't understand all the words. I pulled her into my lap and held her close. This little girl, I said, stroking Maya's hair, has known me for 3 months. 3 months. And in that time, she's given me more love than the three of you have given me in the last 3 years. That's not fair, Marcus said again, but his voice was weaker now. You keep saying that, Angela interjected. What's not fair? That she's telling the truth, that she's finally calling you out on how you've treated her. You don't know anything about our family, Denise snapped at her. I know everything I need to know, Angela shot back. I know your mother cried herself to sleep for 2 weeks after we found her. I know she made excuses for you, even when we told her she didn't have to. I know she kept hoping one of you would call, would check on her, would show even the tiniest bit of concern, and none of you did. We didn't know where she was, Terrence said defensively. You didn't look, Darius said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since Grace. In 3 months, not one of you filed a missing persons report. Not one of you called around to shelters or churches or hospitals. You didn't know where she was because you didn't care enough to find out. The truth of that hung in the air like smoke. We care now, Marcus said, but even he didn't sound convinced. No, I said, you care about Uncle Silas's money. That's what brought you here. That's the only reason you're sitting at this table. Mama, that's not. Don't lie to me. My voice rose, and Maya flinched. I took a breath, calming myself. Please don't lie to me anymore. I'm too old and too tired for lies. If you'd heard I was staying with Angela and Darius but there was no inheritance, would you be here right now? The silence was answer enough. I stood up, still holding Maya, and walked to the drawer where Angela kept important papers now. I pulled out the folder with the letter from the lawyer in Montgomery. You want to know about the inheritance? I said, placing the folder on the table. Here it is. 23 acres, 4 rental properties, 1 commercial building, all left to me by an uncle I barely remembered. An uncle who thought enough of family to leave his life's work to his brother's daughter, even though we hadn't spoken in 40 years. I watched their eyes widen as they read the documents, saw the dollar signs calculating in their heads. Uncle Silas died alone, I continued. No wife, no children, no one at his bedside, just lawyers and nurses. He spent his last years trying to find me, wanting to connect with the only family he had left. And I never got those letters, because I'd moved, because life had gotten hard, because I was too busy surviving to think about anything else. I took the folder back, held it close to my chest. He died alone, I repeated, just like I would have died alone on that highway if Angela and Darius hadn't stopped, just like I would have died alone in some shelter, forgotten and discarded, if these strangers hadn't decided to be my family. We're your family, Denise whispered, and there were real tears on her face now. We're your children. Then act like it, I said. Not now, when there's money involved. Not today, when it benefits you. Every day. The way Angela and Darius have, the way these babies have. Caleb had come to stand beside me, wrapping his small arms around my leg. His presence strengthened me. I loved you three with everything I had, I said, my voice breaking. I sacrificed everything for you. My body, my time, my dreams, my money, all of it went to making sure you had what you needed. And when I needed you, you threw me away like garbage. We're sorry, Marcus said. And for the first time, I heard something real in his voice. Regret. Shame. Mama, we're so sorry. We were selfish and stupid and cruel. You deserved better. Yes, I agreed. I did. Let us make it right, he said. Please, let us prove we can do better. I looked at my son, my firstborn, the one who'd made me a mother, who I'd held in my arms and promised to always protect. I saw the little boy he'd been, the good man he could have become, and the stranger he'd turned into somewhere along the way. Making it right doesn't mean you get access to my inheritance, I said flatly. Making it right means you show up, you call, you visit, you treat me like I matter, not because of what I can give you, but because I'm your mother. We can do that, Denise said quickly. We will do that, will you? Angela challenged, because, forgive me for being skeptical, you had 74 years to do that, and you didn't. Why should she believe you'll change now? Because we have to, Marcus said, and his voice was raw. Because if we don't, we've lost more than an inheritance. We've lost our mother, and money can't fix that. It was the first true thing he'd said all evening. I set the folder down on the table, looked at each of my children in turn, saw the hope and the greed and the regret all mixed together in their faces. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm staying here with Angela and Darius. This is my home now. If you want to be part of my life, you're welcome to visit. You're welcome to call. You're welcome to prove that you've changed. But you don't get to dictate where I live, or how I spend my money, or what I do with my inheritance. Mama, I'm not finished. I've already spoken to Mr. Burke, Uncle Silas's lawyer. I've already made arrangements about the estate. Those arrangements don't include you. Not right now. Maybe not ever. That's a consequence of your choices. You're cutting us out, Terence said, his voice rising. Your own children. You cut me out first, I said simply. You left me on the side of a road to die. I'm just choosing to live without you in the center of my life. I walked to the front door and opened it. The meaning was clear. I think it's time for you to leave, I said. They sat there for a moment, stunned. Then Marcus stood up, pulling out his wallet. Let us at least pay for the meal. I don't want your money, I said. I never wanted your money. I wanted your love, your time, your respect. But I've learned I can live without those things. One by one, they filed out. Denise paused at the door, reaching for my hand. Mama, please, don't do this. I let her hold my hand for a moment, let her feel how much it was shaking. Then I gently pulled away. You did this, I said softly. Not me, you. And I closed the door. After they left, I stood with my back against the door for a long moment, my whole body shaking. Angela came and put her arms around me, and I let myself cry against her shoulder, not the tears of grief I'd cried on that highway, but something different, something that felt like release. You were so strong, Angela whispered. So strong, Miss Evelyn. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I feel like I just cut off my own arms. You set boundaries, Darius said gently, coming to stand beside us. That's not the same as cutting them off. You told them what you need. Now they have to decide if they're willing to give it. We cleaned up dinner together, the four of us moving in comfortable silence. Maya and Caleb helped carry dishes to the sink, and I marveled at how natural this felt, how right. This was family, not perfect, but real, built on choice and love rather than obligation and blood. That night, after the children were asleep, Angela, Darius, and I sat on the porch with glasses of sweet tea, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. What are you going to do? Angela asked. About the inheritance, I mean. I'd been thinking about that for weeks now. Ever since we'd discovered the letter. I'm going to accept it, I said. I'm going to sign the papers and claim what Uncle Silas wanted me to have, and then I'm going to use it wisely. Wisely how? Darius asked. First, I'm going to make sure I'm taken care of for the rest of my life. Get my own small place not too far from here, if that's okay with you. Somewhere I can have my independence but still be close to my grandbabies. This is your home as long as you want it, Angela said quickly. I know, baby, and I'm grateful. But I need my own space. Not because I don't love being here, but because I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own again. They both nodded. Understanding. Second, I continued, I'm going to set up college funds for Maya and Caleb, and any other babies you two might have. Miss Evelyn, you don't have to. I want to, I said firmly. You gave me back my life. You gave me back my dignity. You showed me what real family looks like. This is how I say thank you. Angela's eyes filled with tears. You've already given us so much. Not nearly enough, I said. Not compared to what you've given me. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Darius asked, what about your children? Your real children. I mean, they're my real children. I acknowledged. That doesn't change. But what I give them, if I give them anything, has to come from a place of choice, not obligation. Uncle Silas left this inheritance to me, not to them, me, and I get to decide what to do with it. Over the next few weeks, I worked with Mr. Burke to finalize everything. The properties were indeed worth a substantial amount. The rental income alone would keep me comfortable for the rest of my life. The commercial building had a tenant on a long-term lease, a black-owned bookstore and cafe that was becoming a community hub in Montgomery. I decided to keep the rentals and the commercial building, letting them continue to generate income and provide affordable housing and community space. But the 23 acres that land Uncle Silas had held on to for so long, I had different plans for that. I donated 10 acres to a nonprofit that built affordable housing for seniors, people like me, who'd worked hard all their lives and deserved dignity in their final years. The remaining 13 acres I sold to a developer who promised to build a community center with programs for youth and seniors alike. The money from that sale went into a trust that would support causes I cared about long after I was gone: education programs, food banks, housing assistance, the kinds of things that helped people like me when they fell on hard times. And I set up my will, made it official and legal. With Mr. Burke's help, Angela and Darius would receive the bulk of the estate, the rental properties, the commercial building, and enough cash to secure their children's futures and their own. They'd protested, of course, said it was too much, but I insisted. You saved my life, I told them, not just from dying on that highway, but from dying inside. You gave me purpose again. You gave me family. This is how I make sure you and your babies are taken care of. For Marcus, Denise, and Terrence, I left $1 each, symbolic amounts, a reminder that they were still my children, still in my will, but that their inheritance was measured in lessons learned rather than property gained. And I left them each a letter. I worked on those letters for days, writing and rewriting, trying to find the words that were honest but not cruel, firm but not heartless. In the end, they were shorter than I expected, maybe because there wasn't much left to say that I hadn't already said. Marcus, you were my first baby, the one who made me a mother. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. I still love you, even though love has grown more complicated over the years. You got your father's ambition and drive, but somewhere along the way, you forgot his heart. Robert worked hard and wanted success, but he never measured a person's worth by their bank account. He knew that the richest man is the one surrounded by people who love him, not the one who dies with the most zeros in his account. I'm leaving you $1 because that's what you valued me at, what I could give you materially. But I hope one day you'll realize that what I tried to give you was worth so much more. Love, integrity, compassion, family. Those were the real inheritance, and you threw them away on the side of a highway. If you want a relationship with me going forward, you'll have to build it on something other than money. Show me through your actions, not your words, that you've remembered what it means to be family. With hope for your future, Mama Denise, my only daughter, my girl. You were sensitive from the day you were born, feeling everything so deeply. I tried to protect you from the harshness of the world, but maybe I protected you too much. Maybe I didn't teach you how to be strong and soft at the same time. You've carried resentment like a stone in your pocket for years, convinced I loved your brothers more, convinced I never saw you. But baby, I saw you. I saw every scraped knee I kissed, every broken heart I held, every triumph I celebrated. I saw you, I loved you, but you were so busy looking for what you didn't have that you couldn't see what was right in front of you. I'm leaving you $1 because I can't buy your love or your forgiveness for whatever you think I did wrong. But I hope one day you'll put down that stone you've been carrying and realize that resentment only weighs you down. It doesn't hurt me, it hurts you. I'm here if you decide you want to really see me too. Not the mother you wish you'd had, but the mother I actually was, flawed human, doing the best I could. With love and hope, Mama Terrence, my baby boy. I'll always see you that way, even though you're a grown man now. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe I babied you too long, made excuses for you too often, gave you what you wanted instead of teaching you to work for what you needed. If I failed you, it was in this. I didn't teach you that real strength comes from standing on your own, from facing consequences, from building something instead of always taking. I thought I was helping you by softening every fall, but I was actually keeping you from learning how to get back up. I'm leaving you $1. Because money won't fix what's broken. It'll just delay the lesson you need to learn. Success that comes easy doesn't last. Work that matters requires sacrifice. Love that endures requires showing up, even when it's hard. I hope you'll learn these things. I hope you'll become the man I know you can be, not for me, but for yourself. And when you do, I'll be here, proud of every hard-won step forward, believing in your potential. Mum. Burke assured me the will was ironclad. There's no legal requirement to leave anything to your children, he explained. This is your property, left to you by your uncle. You can dispose of it however you wish. They'll contest it, I said. They might try, he agreed, but you're of sound mind. You've made your wishes clear, and you've left them each something, which actually makes it harder to claim they were accidentally omitted. This will stands. 3 months after that dinner, I moved into my own apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom, in a senior community, not far from Angela and Darius. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, paid for with my own money, decorated with my own things, a space where I could be independent but never alone. The kids came over all the time. Angela and Darius brought them for dinner at least twice a week. Maya and Caleb had their own room at my place, with toys and books and a special grandmother's house smell that came from my cooking, and the lavender sachets I kept in the closets. I joined the church choir, started volunteering at the community center that was being built on Uncle Silas's former land, made friends with other women my age who'd survived their own hardships and come out stronger. I was living, really living, for the first time in years. Marcus called 2 months after they'd left Angela's house. The conversation was awkward, stilted. He asked how I was. I told him. He told me about his business. I listened. Before we hung up, he said, maybe I could visit sometime. Maybe you could, I agreed. If you want to, not because you think you should, but because you want to. I want to, he said, and I almost believed him. Denise sent a card on my birthday. Just a simple card, no long message, but it said, I'm sorry, I'm working on it. I love you. I put it on my refrigerator next to Maya's artwork and Caleb's school photos. Terrence didn't call, didn't write. For a while, I worried. Then I realized that Terrence would come around when he was ready, or he wouldn't. I couldn't control that. I could only control my own heart. And I chose to leave the door open. 6 months after I'd moved into my apartment, Mr. Burke called to tell me the will had been finalized and filed. Everything was official now. Angela and Darius would inherit the properties. The children would get their dollars. The letters would be delivered. How do you feel? Angela asked me that evening. We were sitting in my living room, the children playing on the floor while Darius assembled a bookshelf he'd insisted on buying me. Free, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. For the first time in my life, I feel completely free. Free from what? She asked gently. From the obligation to keep giving to people who only take, from the belief that my worth is tied to how much I sacrifice, from the fear that I'll end up alone and forgotten. I looked at the children, at Darius whistling while he worked, at Angela's kind face. I learned that family isn't about blood, it's about love. And love isn't about grand gestures or inheritances, it's about showing up, it's about stopping on the side of the road when everyone else drives by. Angela's eyes filled with tears. You've taught us just as much, Miss Evelyn, about strength, about dignity, about how to forgive without forgetting, how to be kind without being a doormat. We learned it together, I said. That night, after they left, I sat in my apartment, my home, and looked at the photo album I still kept in my purse, the pictures of Robert, of my children when they were young, of all the years that had led me to this moment. I didn't tear them up, didn't throw them away. They were part of my story, the chapters that had brought me here, but they weren't the whole story anymore. I had new pictures now. Maya and Caleb blowing out candles at birthday parties in my apartment, Angela and Darius helping me plant flowers in the community garden, my church friends at our weekly Bible study, the family I'd chosen and who'd chosen me back. I thought about Uncle Silas, dying alone, trying to reconnect with family he'd lost touch with. I wondered if he'd known somehow that his inheritance would come to me at exactly the moment I needed it most. If he'd understood that the greatest gift wasn't the money or the property, but the chance to reclaim my dignity. Thank you, I whispered to him, to God, to the universe. Thank you for not letting me die on that highway. Thank you for Angela and Darius. Thank you for teaching me that it's never too late to start over. I was 74 years old. My children had thrown me away, but I'd been found by people who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself. I'd inherited property and money from an uncle I barely knew, but the real inheritance was something more valuable than land or buildings. I'd inherited the knowledge that I deserved better. I'd inherited the strength to demand it. I'd inherited a new family built on choice and love, rather than obligation. I'd inherited dignity. And that was worth more than all the acres in Alabama, all the rental properties, all the commercial buildings in the world. I was Evelyn Johnson, daughter, mother, grandmother, survivor, beloved, and I was free. 3 years later, on a spring morning when dogwoods were blooming white and pink across Atlanta, I received a phone call. It was Marcus. His voice sounded different, humbler, softer. "Mama," he said, "I know I don't deserve this, but I've been going to therapy, working on myself, and I'd like to visit, not to ask for anything, just to see you, to tell you in person that I'm sorry, really sorry, and to ask if maybe, possibly, we could start over." I looked out my window at the community garden where I'd planted tomatoes with Angela's help, at the children's playground where Maya and Caleb were swinging while Darius pushed them higher. I looked at the life I'd built from the ashes of the old one. "Yes," I said, "you can visit. We can't erase the past, Marcus, but maybe we can write a better future." "Thank you, Mama," he whispered. "Thank you." When he came, a week later, he brought flowers, not expensive ones from a fancy florist, but simple daisies from the grocery store. He sat in my living room and he cried, really cried, and he told me about the therapy, about confronting his own selfishness, about realizing what he'd lost. "I don't expect you to leave me anything in your will," he said. "I know what I did. I deserve nothing. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be your son again, not the son who left you on that highway, the son you raised me to be before I lost my way." I took his hand, older now, weathered, but still my son's hand. "That's all I ever wanted," I said, "just for you to show up, just for you to see me." It wasn't perfect. We had a long way to go. Denise eventually came around too, slower, more cautious, but trying. Terrence sent a letter from Rahab, saying he was finally getting help, finally growing up. Maybe they'd all find their way back. Maybe they wouldn't, but I'd learned the most important lesson. My worth wasn't determined by whether they loved me or not. I was worthy because I existed, because I'd survived, because I'd loved with everything I had and refused to become bitter when that love wasn't returned the way I deserved. Was worthy because family, real family, had seen me on the side of that road and stopped. Family isn't who abandons you when things get hard. Family is who lifts you up when you've fallen. And I'd been lifted, carried, loved. That was the real inheritance. That was everything.